Amazing.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, hey everybody, welcome to the show. It is Wednesday. Happy hump day, everybody. We have made it through half the week. By the way, breaking news here. The House has actually passed the $1.9 trillion coronavirus bill. Most Republicans, of course, were not in favor of this. It actually won by, I believe, 220 to 211 in the House. So now it goes to Joe Biden to get signed into law. So, yeah, look, you guys know I'm a little mixed on it. There's some good stuff in the bill, but there's some. It's not that there's bad stuff in the bill. It's just there's stuff that's missing. And as a progressive, as somebody who obviously thinks that we as a country should be doing more, it's a little bit depressing there. But there is, like I said, some good stuff and some needed help into that piece of legislation. And so, you know, there it is. People will be getting some sort of help. And I just hope we're able to do more. All right. Anyway, so that said, hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. Or, you know, some semblance of a good day. We got a good show for you all today. We're going to talk about one of the MAGA lawyers, one of the MAGA rioters that is unfortunately getting released on bond. Interesting. Let's see. We also are going to go and talk about a viral video here. A Democrat calls out Republican cancel culture. Fascinating. That's awesome. We also have Katie Porter going after oil executives. That's always fun. Kentucky Republicans are literally trying to destroy free speech and the ability to protest. So they're going for a twofer right there. And so we're going to talk about that. That's going to be an interesting discussion here, or an interesting segment. And then, of course, there's an Uber passenger who is an anti-masker or was an anti-masker, banned from Lyft. That's just fun. So before I get into those stories, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very helpful if you do so. Also, I did not, there was some, apparently some stuff on Twitch that I didn't get to yesterday. So I just want to go and thank some people. I'm not sure if I thanked Autumn Finch for subscribing with Prime. And I also want to thank regular Mole Rat Dragon for cheering the bits, Tempa Dan 19 for cheering the 100 biddies as well. Very, very nice of you. Very kind. And also Fiyuki Swan, thank you for the subscription with Prime. I really appreciate that. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. All right. That said, why don't we dive into today's stories? All right. We got more of the best people, the greatest people, the most tremendous people, as always. All right. MAGA writer and attorney William Calhoun is being released on bail before his trial for being involved, of course, in January 6th Capitol riots. Let me try that again. That was just a disastrous opening here. It's one of those days, someday. All right. MAGA writer and attorney William Calhoun is being released on bail before his trial for being involved in the January 6th Capitol riots. So now he told U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich that, quote, "If I had to do it over again, I would not have gone into the Capitol." Oh, well, look at that. There's more. He says, "I know that I messed up doing that. I apologize for being difficult." Difficult's probably not the word that I would use. But look at that. We got a mea culpa, right? Oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Boy, that was some bad decision making on my part. Okay. Well, look, we'll see how sorry he actually is when we get into things that he's said before. But all right. The news is on this, though, that the judge ultimately okayed Calhoun's bail request. Now, previously, a previous judge had actually denied it before. And so there was an appeal. He went before a different judge, and the judge says, well, yeah, okay, we will allow your bail request. Oh, all right. So now this happened to be over the objections of course, federal prosecutors. Calhoun was granted bail with relatively lax conditions. After the government pushed for internet monitoring provisions, the defense pleaded that such a regime would not be conducive to attorney-client privilege. So they can't monitor the websites that he goes to. Okay. That request, of course, then transformed into a proposal that Calhoun steer clear of all social media, that he even refrained from reading the news. Now, that seems like an odd request. But then, of course, then you realize that a lot of the news or so-called news that this man was inevitably, exposed to was part of his radicalization. So, for example, you watch Fox News, you watch Newsmax, you're going to be fed a steady stream of, oh, it's the Democrats. The Democrats, they rigged the election. They got illegals voting. They're pouring over the border. They're busting them into the polling sites, and that's what happened. And Biden rigged the election against Donald Trump. And so really, in reality, Donald Trump is the real president of the United States. Well, none of that's actually true. So barring him from, watching those news sites and what they're saying and defending the big lie, I guess it kind of makes sense in that case. All right. Nonetheless, no, we're not going to do that. You're allowed to watch the news. In fact, according to the Inner City Press, Calhoun protested that sites like YouTube, he should be able to go onto YouTube because they contain how-to videos. How-to videos. How to be a white nationalist. How to do sedition. Those videos. Because, look, we know what videos he's watching. And we also know that the algorithm, Al Gore's rhythm, right, pushes people into, or at least has traditionally pushed people further and further into conspiracy, propaganda, and radicalization. Okay. Because of the high prevalence of that on the right wing and the algorithm responding to that. And, again, there's been studies where people would, watch one YouTube video, a couple of YouTube videos on something that's random. And suddenly you're like on Alex Jones. And they're like, oh my God, what is this? What is this deep state? Why are the frogs turning gay? And so, it's one of those things where it's like YouTube also, with some of the people, is the radicalization, and it's like a big problem here. All right, and so yes, we know the videos that he was watching. Part of why he was there in the first place. And the other part, of course, is Donald Trump, the president of the United States, and congressmen that were again spreading these conspiracy theories about the election, and so. He went from, by the way, this man went from a Democratic voter to a full-on MAGA chud. And so that's really quite a de-evolution there. And again, it involves being sucked down the alt-right pipeline, which unfortunately has, affected a lot of people. And so nonetheless, the court and the defense ended up settling on basically a social media posting ban. So now Calhoun will not have his internet monitored, and he is not barred from visiting any websites. He just is unable to make public posts. And as you're going to see, some of the posts that he had made, especially on Parler, were a little spicy. And so it is kind of interesting. Now, unfortunately, of course, he continued to consume the kind of media that led him to be at the Capitol building in the first place. Right. Because, nothing bad will happen. But I understand that, like, oh, of course, that's just his, he feels real sorry about that. And, he promises not to do a treason again. So you might be wondering, okay, why did he get such a lenient thing? I mean, like Chansley, for example, a QAnon shaman, he got denied bail. Oh, what's going on? Well, apparently Judge Friedrich agreed with the defense's earlier contention that words do not equal action. And so since he didn't actually physically participate in any of the violence himself, but was just only there to intimidate lawmakers into overthrowing a lawful election, he didn't actually do anything wrong other than just be there. Right. Noting Calhoun's lack of charges for actually having engaged in violence and his familiarity with court orders due to his years as an attorney, the court signed off on his release with GPS monitoring. Now, the judge said that words don't equal action, right? Okay, well, let's have an examination of some of the words that Calhoun had been saying to his MAGA friends. And we'll see whether or not, these words might be of some concern, and why, of course, he was denied bail in the first place. Because again, this is the second court appearance with this time with a different judge in order to figure out whether he or not he could get pretrial bail. So now, in one post, and this is it appears that it's full of tough talk. All right. Now, one post from his late January initial appearance, Calhoun wrote of his desire to place Black Lives Matter protesters in body bags, saying that he wanted racial justice advocates stacked up high, standing by, and when Trump makes the call, many heavily armed patriots will deal with the Chi-Com Democrats, another post said. Also adding, oh yeah, the police and military, they're on our side. So obviously, they're on our side. Yeah, obviously Antifa, clearly Antifa, right? Antifa. Calhoun also repeatedly expressed his desire for, quote, violent retribution against the media and the Democrats, and told one BLM supporter on Twitter that they, quote, won't be laughing when patriots go door to door executing you commies. Another post, Calhoun promised headshots for certain members of the media who had been poking a little bit of fun at Tiffany Trump. Oh, well, how chivalrous of you. You're protecting the honor and integrity of the wonderful Tiffany Trump. Also, he wrote in another post, God is on Trump's side. God is not on the Democrat side. And if patriots have to kill 60 million of these communists, holy shit, that escalated quickly. It is God's will. Think ethnic cleansing, but it's anti-communist cleansing. So, all right. Seems a little extreme. Tiny bit. And it's funny. Not to go tanky here. Isn't one of the main talking points that the conservatives like to use against communism is that, man, communism killed so many people. That's why we can't have it. Okay. I find that ironic. Again, I'm not tanky or anything, but I just find that super ironic. Where they're like, oh, communism kills. That's why we need to murder the communists. But wait, and here's the thing. You're not really going to find a lot of communists in the Democratic Party. Right? The Democratic Party is nowhere near communist. The most left that we have in the Democratic Party is actually the sock Dems. You know, smattering of socialists. I know there's some tankies online. But like generally, the most left that we have inside of power structures in the Democratic Party is essentially capitalist social democrats who want, you know, a Nordic style welfare state. So I'm just saying, like, but now, oh, there's one more actually. This guy is also on Parler, or he was on he was on Parler. This is what he posted there. For my part, I'll be slinging enough hot lead to stack you commies up like cordwood. Charming fella. Really. But yeah, hey, look, you might just be thinking, okay, this guy's is tough talk. He's bloviating, you know, whatever, right? Well, I don't know about that. Yes, while it is true that he did not do any violence at the Capitol, when he was arrested, federal agents did say he had at least 2 rifles, 4 shotguns, a pistol, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in his possession. But must certainly be for, you know, just hunting, right? Right. I don't know. For me, I would think that this man might be a little bit of a threat. Just a little bit. And knowing that he, of course, is an attorney, I mean, he's got a little bit of knowledge of how the whole justice system works. And do you think somebody like that might be smart enough to manipulate that system? I mean, you tell me. You be the judge. And you might come up with something better than this judge, by the way. And again, this is his second time. The first judge looked at that and was like horrified. This was U.S. Magistrate Judge Charles Weigel had denied him bail as a result of this, saying that this guy is deeply problematic, the stuff that this man is saying. And so, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, for other safety, I definitely want to keep him in jail for his trial. And so now you might be wondering, since he's getting out, what's his plan? That's just a fun note here. He admitted that he's going to go to Disney. No, he's not going to Disney. He's going to go to dinner. Quote, I know my friends are probably going to want to take me out tonight to buy me a steak and a glass of wine. Of course. He and his MAGA boys, his buddies, they're going to go out, probably without masks, because, you know, of course, and celebrate the fact that he did threaten to kill people and was at the Capitol for Donald Trump and managed to get bail. I guess in some cases, right-wing privilege pays off. Lightly treasoned. Oh, lightly treasoned. So good. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's go to cancel culture, since we love to talk about that in the show. But wait, this is good. A Democratic lawmaker is sick and tired of Republicans blocking every single thing that actually might help working Americans, and decided yesterday to go on a pretty fiery rant and called them out for not only blocking, but also taking a little jab at Republican cancel culture. Take a look.
Mr. Speaker, one of the earlier speakers said, this is the most dramatic change in labor law in 80 years. And I say, thank God. In the late 70s, a CEO made 35 times the worker. Today, it's 300 to 400 times the worker. And our friends on the other side running around with their hair on fire. Heaven forbid we pass something that's going to help the damn workers in the United States of America. Heaven forbid we tilt the balance that has been going in the wrong direction for 50 years. We talk about pensions, you complain. We talk about the minimum wage increase, you complain. We talk about giving them the right to organize, you complain. But if we were passing a tax cut here, you'd be all getting in line to vote yes for it. Now stop talking about Dr. Seuss and start working with us on behalf of the American workers.
Damn, that's spicy. I love it. Wow, when did he get so not boring? Love it. All right, so now the context here is this is during a debate about the PRO Act. So what's the PRO Act? It's actually a pretty good piece of legislation. It stands for the Protecting the Right to Organize. So basically, it's a pro-union bill. Being somebody who is very pro-labor myself and who has been part of a union, I love it. I absolutely do love it. So let me give you some of the provisions that are in the PRO Act. So you all are familiar with right to work, right? So this right to work basically allows non-unionized freeloaders, right? And so used to be, you didn't want to join a union in a union shop. Well, you still ended up having to pay the dues because you still ended up getting the benefits of that union, even if you didn't actually want to be part of it. So right to work essentially got rid of that, saying, oh, don't worry, you can still benefit from union contracts in a union workplace, but you don't have to pay for it. Essentially, freeloaders, okay? So we should just rename right to work to right to freeload, essentially. Because what you're doing is that you're profiting off the work and the money of the unions, and they're fighting for benefits and better wages. If you don't want to be part of the union, then maybe you shouldn't get those pay raises. Maybe you shouldn't get the benefits of a union contract if you're not going to actually be part of the union. But that's just me. And so this bill, what this does is that it would allow unions to override right to work laws. Oh, that's good. Now, it would also collect dues from those who opt out of joining the union in order to cover the cost of the collective bargaining and the administration of the contract. So then, that is an incredibly good thing to hear. I like that. That's a good piece of legislation because I absolutely despise the freeloading and despise those right to work laws. And so now there's more. It would also end employee interference and influence in union elections. So now it also would end and make illegal company-sponsored meetings with mandatory attendance. So now the problem with that is that they're often used to lobby against a union organization drive. So it would end that practice. Additionally, employees would be able to cast a ballot in union organizing elections at a location that is away from company property. So now you might think, okay, what's the issue there? Well, it would prevent intimidation by people from the company. So, all right, that's good. Now, the PRO Act would also allow newly certified unions to seek arbitration and mediation to get an agreement on a first contract between labor and management. So oftentimes when there's a brand new union drive, you end up having some difficulties being able to get the company to actually recognize that union once it's established. This would allow these newly certified unions, newly established unions, to get a first contract on the books. That's awesome. Now, not only that, the law would prevent an employer from using its employee's immigration status against them when determining the terms of their employment. So there's protections for immigrant workers. It would also establish monetary penalties for companies and executives that would violate workers' rights. Corporate directors and other officers of the company could also be held liable. So now, before I go on to that, I just want to thank Kevin Logan, KF Logan 1875, for the rating party of 44. Welcome, Raiders. I am talking about union membership. We are talking about the PRO Act, which is very, very pro-labor. I love it. And, of course, Tim Ryan's epic blow up at Republicans. All right, so let's move it here. So now, again, this would help boost up unions in this country, which unfortunately are incredibly small. In fact, only about 6.3% of private sector employees are currently in a union, and only about 34% of public sector employees are part of a union. So now, this is a direct reason why wages in this country are so low, why you have such high corporate profits, and why you have such high income inequality, and why a lot of jobs do not offer any sort of benefits. So it's also why direct action, such as a general strike, has almost no chance of actually happening, being organized or executed. Now, I've been in favor of doing general strikes, of making sure that, we have the ability to really to use that direct action as a way to get Congress to pass our priorities. Generally, if you want something like that to happen, it's going to have to be organized at a very large level, and unions are pretty much the best way to be able to do that. Without the unions, one of those things is very difficult to be able to actually organize and execute. So we need that union, we need that labor power together. So labor, of course, is massively underrepresented in this country. That's why we need a boost. And by the way, to give an example of what unions actually do for this, for example, Denmark. Okay, Denmark has a minimum wage of about $22 to $23 an hour. They do not have a federally mandated minimum wage. Why? It's because labor makes it about 70% of Danes are in a labor union. And so basically they've been able to, as a result of that, set a de facto minimum wage of that much. That's pretty good. That is the power of the union. And by the way, that also helps them not have to rely on government politicians, for example, to set a minimum wage in their country. So, for example, here, the problem with the minimum wage is it's still $7.25 after like at least a decade. And that's because we have to rely on millionaire congressmen to get off their butts and actually vote in favor of a minimum wage. And of course, with our system that is heavily, heavily corrupted by money in politics, by the Chamber of Commerce, this is why we do not get the votes to be able to pass a minimum wage. If we had labor power in this country that was equal to that of the Danes or better, well, then, and not just the Danes, but other countries that have larger labor sectors and labor unions, then we would actually be able to have those benefits and be able to have higher pay, sick leave, paid leave, things like that. All right. And so that's what we need in this country. Now, as a result, big corporations, big business, and their lobbying groups are not in favor of this. They hate the PRO Act. They hate labor. And of course, these groups end up paying these Republicans with the aforementioned massive corruption, and that's why Republicans are massively against this, and that's why this unfortunately is going to end up dying in the Senate. So they're not going to budge on this. Right now, we've got a 50-50 Senate with people who generally caucus and vote with Democrats. That's not always the case. I'm not even sure that all Senate Democrats would be on board. Again, it's an open question whether or not Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema is going to be a friend to labor or not. I don't necessarily know. But I do know that the Republicans will likely filibuster this. All right. And the reason they'll filibuster is because they don't give a damn about the workers. They represent the corporations. They despise working people. They think we're all idiots. They can't see that, and that they think that we can't see the big corporations are the ones that are actually screwing us over. And to ensure that, Ryan actually points out that Republicans right now are talking about nothing but culture war stuff. Dr. Seuss, cancel culture, the potato head. As if talking about any of those things will get you higher wages, paid vacation time, maternity leave, or safe working conditions. But again, what they have here is just a massive distraction. That's all culture war rage bait stuff. And that's what this is. And they do that because they don't have any sort of policies that help regular people. Again, it is about the rich, it's about the donors, and also the Republican Party is about nothing but upholding and continuing white supremacy. That's what it is. Still, we've got to organize and we've got to get Americans back into labor unions. It's the only way I think that we're ever going to have any sort of movement for workers in this country. All right. Moving on. And by the way, I do know that Tim Ryan's an interesting case, right? So Tim Ryan's like a centrist. He's a pretty centrist Democrat. But I believe he was getting together with, I think it was, now I forget who, but he was Ro Khanna, that's right, and was pushing $2,000 a month monthly stimulus checks. I mean, he's got his moments. So calling out this cancel culture stuff, being, pro labor union and pro $2,000 checks, those are some good marks for him. But also remember that as far as other things like Medicare for all, he is fairly centrist. And so it's kind of a mixed bag. And that's kind of how the Democratic Party really is. And maybe it makes you think that perhaps if you had more support, more people that were openly pushing for Medicare for all within the party, that might help convince Democrats that might be on the fence, might be on the line, to support it. So there's that. Just a thought. All right. He co-sponsored the Emergency Money for the People Act with O'Connor for $2,000 a month. That's absolutely what we should have done too. Do you think online organization might allow us to have movements without the need of a union to start it off? I don't know. I mean, we've had the ability to organize online for quite some time. And so far, really, to be honest, all we've used it for is to fight each other on the left. We've got so much leftist infighting at this point. The establishment is sitting there laughing at us for the fact that we can't get along with each other enough to be able to really use our power to be able to do it. You need labor to support walkouts, boycotts help. True. Very, very true. Tim Ryan was one of the lamer 2020 presidential candidates. Also true. It's all performative since he knows it won't pass. Perhaps. But then again, can anybody ever say anything, in Congress? Can anyone actually ever do anything? Because again, 99% of everything that happens in Congress is performative, to be fair. Because if you're judging it by that metric and viability of it passing, well, then basically you're saying that they might as well not do anything because nothing will pass. I mean, again, you've got, anybody who, for example, comes up and talks about Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders talks about Medicare, the need for Medicare for all, the need for $2,000 checks. He knows it's not going to pass. And so there is a method, though. There's a reason for the performativeness, and that's to get people that hopefully you're sitting at home, to get them engaged. And that's what you want. You get people engaged, and you get them to want to actually do something, to organize, to maybe try to fight for these movements, or to run for office to try to replace some of the people who, are not represent them. And so what I'm trying to do is, I've noticed that there's so much blackpilling now that we can't that you might, nothing's ever going to change. So we might as well not do anything at all. I think that's an incredibly defeatist ideology. And it's not going to get us anywhere near the change that a lot of us profess to actually want. So that's just me, overdosed on the black pills. I understand why. I just don't agree. We definitely need to step a little bit away from the black pills. All right, now let's go to the next one. Representative Katie Porter went viral again for dunking on an oil executive during the hearing. In fact, following her recent appointment as chair of the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Oversight, Porter was one of several Democrats to introduce legislation last week that would raise royalty rates on oil and gas companies for the first time in a century. So I think that's, again, needed. Now, Mark Murphy, however, president of Strato Production Company, argued against that in a subcommittee video hearing on Tuesday, saying that, that's not fair. That's not fair because we don't actually get any sort of special tax benefits from the government. Now, laugh along with me, right? Because, look, here's the funny thing. Anybody who's gone up against Katie Porter knows that she does her homework, she knows her stuff, and she ends up bringing receipts. And so I want to show you this segment where she goes after and basically calls him out for his just gigantic lies about the preferential treatment of big oil. Take a look.
How much of those intangible drilling costs do you get to deduct right away from your taxes?
We get to deduct all of those just like any other business. We do not.
How much do you get to deduct?
There seems to be a misconception out there that you're operating from, that somehow the oil and gas industry benefits from some special sort of tax structure. We don't. We actually.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Murphy.
Other industries, right?
I will follow up with you, Mr. Murphy, but you do benefit from special rules. There's a special tax rule for intangible drilling costs that does not apply to other kinds of expenses that businesses have. You get to deduct 70% of your costs immediately, and other businesses have to amortize their expenses over their entire profit stream.
We also.
So please don't patronize me by telling me that the oil and gas industry doesn't have any special tax provisions. Because if you would like that to be the rule, I would be happy to have Congress deliver.
I love the ending right there. Well, I mean, if you want that to be the case, well, I can certainly get Congress to try to do something like that. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Now, I love this for a couple of reasons. Obviously, calling him out for his complete BS and lies. I'm going to show you how they absolutely do get a lot of not just tax benefits, but also direct subsidies. But first, I just want to point out how it's funny that it seems like nobody in the business world is prepared to be called out. Like, have they not seen this happen before? Have they not seen how actually incredibly smart these women are? And again, Katie Porter, AOC, Bernie Sanders, yes, even Elizabeth Warren. I know a lot of you guys are pretty angry. You know, she's a snake and everything like that. But boy, when she grills bankers, I don't know. Yeah, I gotta love that. They're pretty good at questioning these CEOs, at least, over some lies and shady practices. So now, specifically, let me get into the break that she was talking about, the intangible drilling cost deduction. Now, that, of course, allows companies to deduct a majority of the costs incurred from drilling new wells domestically. So now it turns out it's a pretty big money saver for these companies, as she said, at least up to 70% of the costs. So how much does it actually save in monetary figures? Well, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation, they estimated that eliminating the tax breaks for intangible drilling costs would actually generate an additional $1.5 billion in revenue. This was in 2017, or about $13 billion over the next 10 years, or over a 10-year period. Wow, that's not bad. About $1.6 billion. Now, think about that. And you could say, compared to other budgetary items, for example, okay, that's a lot of money, but it's actually not that much when you think about it. Well, understand that, though, there's not that many oil companies. And so when you kind of gather them all together, generally, that's still a pretty big chunk of change. These companies, there are very few of them, and they're pretty wealthy as hell. I mean, imagine that money, for example, being used, instead of going to the most profitable industry on earth, going to roads, bridges, schools, things like that. That'd be kind of nice. Now, that $1.59 billion, that's also not a lot when you compare to the profit margin, how much, these companies make, and how much in subsidies they get from the government. Now, these companies, and this is an outstanding fact, it blows your mind, right? According to the latest International Monetary Fund's report, around 6.5% of global, this is all, all around the world, right? Global GDP, it's about $5.2 trillion, was spent on fossil fuel subsidies. All around the world, we are subsidizing the hell out of fossil fuels. And that's, of course, includes negative externalities. And these are 2017 numbers. These externalities, of course, are related to climate change, oil spills, fires, explosions, global conflicts over access to these resources. That's an externality. And so it makes sense that there's so much money involved in oil and gas and these fossil fuels. And so that's a lot of money. I think that there's absolutely no excuse for these subsidies. And in fact, they also break it down by the the countries that give out the largest amount in subsidies. The largest subsidizers, there's China, which is essentially a state-run corporation. $1.4 trillion was given out in subsidies in 2015. The U.S. follows behind with $649 billion. This is annually that is given out to oil and gas companies in the form of just subsidies. And Russia, who gives out $551 billion in subsidies. Again, I don't think there's any excuse to have these subsidies. Yes, there was a time where actually companies did need them. I'm actually not against subsidies for certain things. Oil companies don't need subsidies. At this point, no, they don't need subsidies. You know who could use subsidies, actually? Alternative energy, renewable energy. Okay, I think those subsidies at a limited basis for a limited time are actually justified and justifiable. Okay, and actually should be used as an incentive to, get away from fossil fuels. You should take those subsidies from fossil fuels, probably cut them in half, and distribute them among the different forms of energy, wind, solar, geothermal, etc.